Alright. Hopefully everyone can hear me on this. I ran a test. In fact, I'm gonna listen to myself on my stream. My stream. Yeah, I can hear myself. Okay, cool. So, after someone complained, rightfully so, yesterday about the noise of my keyboard when I was typing, which is why I actually moved this in the first place. There was an earlier stream where it was like right above the keyboard and picking everything up. I was hoping that it wouldn't be so bad. And I tried using other software to fix the background noise and stuff, but it was still picking it up. So I signed up for the software that Discord uses to cancel out background noise and tested it. It seemed to be working really well. In fact, I'm running an air conditioner literally 4 feet away from me, and when I did the test, I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear my typing at all. I couldn't hear anything but my voice. I hope that's the case for everyone watching this. So, fingers crossed. And yesterday, I also kind of messed with the background music, tried to lower that a bit so it wasn't so loud and that I wasn't competing with it as much. So I hope I'm getting it all kind of dialed in at this point. See if anyone has any comments. If it's off a little bit, let me know in the chat or DM me on Discord or whatever, and try to mess with it some more. So, man, these Wednesday streams are it's a fast turnaround from Tuesday night, and my throat's still a little sore, but we're gonna do our best and just try to stay hydrated and get through it. Okay. Yesterday I started reviewing, or just showing, I'm not sure I was reviewing, just kind of explaining about a bunch of books that have had a big impact in my life as far as the journey that I've been on trying to unfuck it for a significant amount of time. Decade and a half, really since the early 20s, when things were just really not good. I started trying to figure out some answers, and it's been a lot of research, it's been a lot of effort and work and learning and applying and everything else. And even though I would learn a lot over that time, and I would try to apply, I don't know that it was really embedded or ingrained until I hit a point that I was completely just hit rock bottom, and then had to kind of rebuild a new me as far as a philosophy, a way of life, a belief system, and that has really changed everything. And so a lot of what I'm talking about on the stream, about what I think, how I try to help people and everything, is informed by my experiences and that system that, you know, once I adjusted my mindset and my beliefs and everything, things started to get better. And I'm not necessarily saying, like, we're not talking about, like, political beliefs, like, I'm talking about, like, deep, like, modes of being, how you operate in the world, how you view the world, things like that. My politics were affected by that, but that's not where I was starting or even trying to address it. That wasn't the point at all. And there's something to be taken from all of these books that I think are just really solid aspects of living a life that doesn't suck. Because, again, as I went over last night, any you know, even the crappy Buddhists will tell you, because everyone knows it, life is suffering. It's the first noble truth, right? So how do we get past that? The Buddhist answer is to kind of release attachment, have the Eightfold Path, right mindfulness, right action, all that kind of stuff, which it's I don't disagree with a large portion of that. Um, but I think it's asking too much of the regular person to give up all attachments, to transcend, basically, and become enlightened. Um, and I'll use an example. It's like, it's one thing to say, okay, well, I can detach from some of my material possessions, but should I really detach from, like, my parents so that when they die, I'm not suffering? I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe I should suffer a little, um, and be upset and miss them and have some grief about that. Um, I'm not sure that you can have all the good moments and then when that comes along, just be like, I'm detached. So, in my opinion, uh, uh, the way to kind of transcend that suffering is to instead build more meaning and purpose into your life and have a philosophy or belief system that makes it worth it going through the suffering that is there from attachment, but that justifies it. So, let's talk about the first book today. This book is called Extreme Ownership. It is by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. These guys are Navy SEAL officers. Jocko Willink has his own podcast called Jocko Podcast. He also has his own energy drink line, and a line of teas that he likes, and like a few other apparel and stuff like that. He's got a really interesting podcast where he really looks squarely in the eye some tough, tragic, dark topics. War, especially given that he was a Navy SEAL. This guy is ultra disciplined. He is, but interestingly enough, he's, despite being a Navy SEAL officer and very military, he also plays guitar in a rock band. He surfs. He does MMA, and to the point that he trains with actual guys who have competed in the UFC. He's like at that level. He is a leader. It's not just that he was a Navy SEAL, he was a leader of Navy SEALs. He led a task force or unit, or both, it was the same thing, in Iraq. The what's that guy? American Sniper, Chris Kyle. That Jocko was his commander. So if you've ever seen that movie or know anything about Chris Kyle, and you saw the kind of shit that they dealt with, Jocko was over there leading. He wasn't the overall commander of the armed forces, but he was certainly a major player in making in the war effort over there. And then beyond that, he has also been like the training leader here stateside for new Navy SEALs. And there's another Navy SEAL I'm going to talk about later on who went through training while Jocko was kind of like overseeing it. Extreme Ownership, the title alone should talk about, should inform you what this book is about. And I have talked about responsibility, and the difference between fault and responsibility. And just because something isn't your fault doesn't mean it's not necessarily your responsibility. And interestingly enough, this book makes a strong case that the more responsibility you take for like everything, the better your life gets. And I think that has proven to be true. And I would say that as someone who, again, a lot of people who watch this know that I play an MMO called Nexus. It has a strong socio-political structure where players run things, and I hold a leadership position that is right at the top. And I have not just the people in my own organization below me, but, we do a lot for the entire game. And so, am I running a multi-million-dollar corporation in real life? No, I'm not. But the medium doesn't really matter because I'm still in a leadership position, leading an organization, trying to get them on board to do things, to make things happen, to tackle initiatives, to keep them motivated, to make them want to enjoy and buy into what we're doing. And I really think that this book, it talks about stepping up and taking responsibility and, just really taking ownership in any situation you can. And a lot of my leadership philosophy and what I think has contributed to, in my opinion, the significant growth of my organization since I took over. I really don't want to take credit for the hard work that everyone below me did. I think it's really important that I state right now, there are so many people who have contributed hours and hours and hours, and their own ideas. It wasn't all my ideas, it wasn't all my work, it wasn't any of that kind of stuff. I think they probably deserve a lot more credit than I do, if I'm being really honest, because, I almost, even if I'm putting the same amount of work, I almost get like a lot more credit, where what they do is almost more thankless, because most people just, no one's thanking Apple engineers. They were thanking Steve Jobs for the iPhone, right? But he just kind of was like, okay, people, here's what I want. I want a phone with just a screen that can play music and stuff. Go figure it out. And other people had to do it. And then he just looked at it. It's like, no, this is shit. This is shit. This is shit. Okay, this one's kind of good, but still kind of shit. Until they finally got to the one that he liked. And he's like, okay, we're going with this one. And then he goes on stage and holds it up. He's like, look, this is magical. It's amazing. It's incredible. We wouldn't take away from Steve Jobs that he was a leader and a visionary and all that kind of stuff, but we also really need to give credit to the guys who were figuring out how are we gonna do this, and of course Steve Jobs was involved in everything, so I'm not trying to downplay my own involvement, but a lot of credit goes to the other people. But nonetheless, it was by following a lot of principles in this book regarding how I approached the decisions that had to be made, the conversations I had to have, the holding certain people accountable when I needed to, resolving disputes. All these kinds of things absolutely play a part in getting people to buy in, to be on board, to get behind you as a leader, to want to work, to have a higher morale, all these kinds of things. But even if you're not in a leadership position, simply applying a lot of the principles to your life makes sense because you are the leader of your life. So even if you're not leading a group or an organization or doing something in a game or in real life, a company or your local chess club or whatever the hell it is that, if you have 0 spots where you are over other people, a board member of your kids' little league team, I don't care. You have none of that, you still will get value out of this book just because it is really hitting home just a really good mindset that makes it so that you are empowered. And when you're empowered, rather than this isn't my job, this isn't my responsibility, that's too hard, this is someone else's problem, I don't want to deal with that, whatever the case is, that also happens to trickle throughout other aspects of your life where you kind of allow yourself to be victimized or be a victim. Now, again, to be clear, because I've talked about this before, being a victim is not... It's not something that I'm saying you can't be. In the sense that you do have to accept that you were victimized sometimes. Like if you had, again, pick your trigger warning, whatever happened to you that might trigger someone if I brought it up. If those things happened to you, of course you were a victim. And you need to actually take the first step and accept that happened and that was wrong. But immediately after, you want to try to get away from being a victim and transform into survivor as soon as possible. Because as long as you stay victim, you are going to feel weak, you're going to feel disempowered, you are going to have negative beliefs and stories that are just like holding you back, dragging you down, all these kinds of things, and that just isn't beneficial for you. It's really not. You know, I'm not trying to blame victims or anything like that, but I'm saying it is your responsibility to try to figure out how to get the fuck past it as soon as possible. And this book indirectly can help with that. It can get you thinking in a certain way where it's like, if I were to adopt aspects of this mindset that these guys have, I would feel empowered and be able to more quickly make changes in my life that would get me to where I want to go, which is likely not being in so much pain and suffering, right? Because if you feel empowered to tackle it, it's a thing where it's like, if you don't feel like it's in your power and you can't do anything, or it's not your job, or like whatever else, then you're at the whims of circumstance or other people. Whereas if you do feel empowered, and you do feel like, okay, no, this is my responsibility, I can tackle this, I can take it, I'm gonna do it because this is gonna make me better. Thank you for the follow. If you start to adopt that mindset, your life is just gonna be way, way better. It's gonna help you get past traumas. It's going to help you go forward even if you're past those traumas. And as you lead your life, it will simply by default be inspiring to other people. Because no one looks at someone, despite modern times, you don't look at a victim and go, oh, that person's living such a great life. You can empathize and you can have compassion, and we should. But on the flip side, when someone is stepping up, they're taking ownership of their life, they're making things happen, and they're going in a positive direction, it's inspiring. It's inspiring to us because that's what we should all be trying to do. Right? So if it's not inspiring to you to take control of your life, and or when you see someone who has done that and who is making things happen for themselves and others, because often when we're making, I'm not suggesting to use this as a selfish thing. I'm suggesting to build your life up where it also helps the rest of the world. If you do it properly, I think that's the case, because as you build up, your cup floweth over. And I'll return to something. I don't know if I brought it up on the stream before, but again, going back to the game I play, our organization has this kind of idea about 3 duties, and one is duty to self, the other is duty to the organization, and the other is duty to the community or the world at large. And they're all equally important. And I think about my life this way even outside of the game. They're all equally important, but the way you order them matters. So you have to take care of yourself first and be okay, and then you can begin to help your inner circle, and then you can begin to help your outer circle. And then as you do that, it will come back to you, and it forms a positive feedback loop. And then you rise up more, and then you can give more, right? So because if you're not taking care of yourself and you're just like homeless, you can't help anyone. right? But if you are doing good, then you can give a little bit back, and then karmically that will return back to you, and you will do a little bit better because you help someone else, so it will come back to you. So on, and it might take a while, to be fair, but so on and so forth. It just keeps building and building, and you go higher and higher and higher. But the idea is not to just be like, I'm going to go higher and higher because I'm greedy and selfish. The idea is to keep this positive feedback loop going and just growing it more and more and more. And the more people who do this, the more the world gets better. The more you get better, and the more the world gets better. And at the core of that is you taking ownership of your life and doing things to take care of yourself and to treat yourself like someone you love, because you should love yourself. I think that's the way to actually change the world. I don't think it's, going and protesting outside the Senate and holding picket signs and shit. I just don't. If you want to see real change, be a better person. Try to affect those around you, make them better. Really solid book. Really, this is one. Not every book I am gonna bring up have I read from start to finish. Not just today, but other days as well. This is one I read start to finish. Most of the ones I've read start to finish, but there's a few that it's like it just had one or two really key ideas, but the rest of the book was filler, and it's like, well, I'm not wasting my time. As soon as I got like a few more chapters in, I realized it was all filler. I'm like, yeah, I got it. I'm good. Right? And side note about reading books, if you are someone who struggles to read, like me, I actually don't read nearly as much as I'd want to. And lately I have not been reading at all because I am so busy. I'm so busy. I can't even do, I like to journal, and even that is a struggle to fit in every single day. First off, Audible has been a godsend for me. Like, when I'm just walking this little guy over here, I often listen to music, but sometimes if I am really stuck on something and reading a book that's addressing a problem I'm having in my life, I will just, for an hour, be listening to an audiobook, and I put it on like 1.5 speed or something. You can usually get through a significant portion of any audiobook over the course of an hour at 1.5 speed. It's like an hour and a half of audio. Most books are in the 4 to 6 hour range, so you got like through a third of a book ish, maybe a quarter of it. You do that a few days and you've knocked a book out. Also though, I once we talked yesterday about habit formation. I brought up the book Atomic Habits. If you are struggling to build that habit, or you just I should read or whatever. First off, I talked about it yesterday. Start really small. Like, read one page at a time. Build a habit where over the course of a week you read 1 page a day. Then take it to 2 pages or something like that. But don't try to go, I'm going to read 3 chapters every night, or I'm going to read for half an hour every night. Like, that's just not going to work. You're going to read for 3 minutes. Stop after 3 minutes. But a really interesting way of reading books that I heard about from someone who was quite a prolific reader. They suggested you don't have to just read books from start to finish and like grind it out or anything like that. What you could do is take a book, open it up, turn to the table of contents, and look at the parts of the book that might be the most interesting to you. What jumps out at you, right? Chapter 6 jumps out at me. Go to chapter 6. Start reading chapter 6. If you're into chapter 6, maybe jump to the next section that seemed good to you. If the next section seemed good and you're enjoying it and everything, then that's a book that might be worth investing in and reading from start to finish and going through. But if you go to chapter 6 and it's not hooking you, and that's the part that you thought would be the best part, that's probably not a book worth wasting your time, right? So the problem a lot of people feel is like, oh, if I start a book, I gotta finish it, or and then they get caught up, like they start reading and they realize they don't like the book, and then they just kind of put it down, and they get like turned off from reading in general. And it's just not a super efficient smart way of actually reading, you know? You don't have to read a book from start to finish just because someone recommended it to you. You can flip through it and go, is this something I'm even going to like? Am I vibing with what's being said here based on what I think calls to me the most? If not, put it down. Like, you're not obligated to read the book. And again, I said some of these books I didn't finish to the end because it was like, I'm not getting anything else out of it at this point, so I'm done with it. But I still got what I needed or wanted out of it. So just a tip in case you're struggling to read, I have a list that I'm although my list is 20 in the list, some of these are multiple books, like all kind of grouped together. And so technically I have something like 30 books listed here. That's a lot. In the sense that if you're watching and you're trying to get your life together, just starting to get through 30 books, that's a lot to wade through. And like I'm saying here, all of these had an impact on my life. So it's a big time investment to build up the background of knowledge and information that came from these books to then apply to my life. So if you're just getting started, it's like, well, that's... And there's work associated with it too. It's not just you read the book and then like, okay, now I'm good to go. Like some of this you have like work you actually need to do. So, yeah, if you're struggling to start that habit, I would say first off, only try to read 1 to 2 pages at a time. You could use Audible to fit it in when you're already doing other stuff like walking a dog or driving in a car. A lot of people have turned their lives around by simply turning off the radio and turning on audiobooks or really intelligent podcasts or lectures on YouTube or whatever else, some information, and listening as they do other stuff like drive or make dinner or whatever else. But back to actually physically reading books, if you're getting into reading and you're trying to build that habit, make it something that you actually want to do. And you can check that by going, okay, let me jump to the part in this book that looks really good. If it's really good, I'll jump to a second part. If that's really good, then I'll try reading this from start to finish and see how it goes. If it's not vibing with you on the parts that you think stood out the most, just put it down and move on to the next book and find one that is actually calling to you, And in some cases too, the book is just not at the right time in your life, Some of these books just might not be what you're struggling with. I brought up A Confession by Leo Tolstoy last night. If you're not wrestling with the question of God, then that's not a book that you need to read right now. Or it could be a book you read just for some insight, but it's probably not going to be nearly as impactful or hit you as it did me when I found it, because that is what I was wrestling with at the time. All right, next book. No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert A. Glover. If anyone watching this is a man or boy that considers themselves a nice guy, people tell them they're a nice guy, anything like that, you just need to go buy this book right now. You really need to buy this book. I have been kind of talking about the ratings you see on, like, how many people leave reviews on Amazon. There were some other books that I pointed out last night that had like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. I mean, we're at 6,000 on this one, and again, if you look at like the 5 and 4 star reviews, we're around 90% positive. This book is so good, especially for the current generation, and especially for a lot of gamers, especially for a lot of guys that, like myself, came from a family of divorce, where you are more heavily influenced, or you have a lack of a father figure, and therefore you're just naturally more heavily influenced by a mother figure. This book is so insightful because the author actually worked through and developed this himself, because he was there, so he understands it and knows. He is also a certified therapist, so he's a doctor, Robert Glover, not just dude who went through shit. It is a book where you are going to be challenged to do some exercises that are not super comfortable. They're called break-free activities, I believe, BFAs. But there's a ton of insight into how you think you're a good person and you're actually not. And when all these bad things happen to you, it's your fault. And you need to take responsibility and ownership for it. Again, maybe it's not your fault that you learned some bad lessons out of, a family of divorce, or not having a father figure, and you just never learned lessons or anything like that. But it is your responsibility to fix it. So often, the root of being a nice guy, and I speak from experience on this, is you are doing it to get something back out of it. And often, as in what the author terms as covert contracts, basically, if I do this, then I expect that back. But the other person hasn't been made explicitly aware that you expect this, and then you get mad because it was like, well, I did this, why aren't they doing this back? Right? So if I am, let's talk about like a relationship. If I buy my significant other flowers, I expect a blowjob. I mean, but it's not just a sexual thing, it's a across life thing. At work, dealing with coworkers, if I help my coworker with this, I expect something back. If I do this, I expect something back. That's not the entirety of the book, but it's just in one big insight into the mode of being that nice guys, like the paradigm they operate in. And that really needs to change and stop, because it leads you to basically being a giant bitch. And if you really don't want to be a giant bitch anymore, then you need to stop being a nice guy. But I don't want to stop being nice. Because what's wrong with being nice? Well, if I might offer a different angle of looking at it. If someone ever tells me I'm a nice guy, I go, I appreciate that, but no, I'm a kind man. Kindness is different than nice guy. You can be kind, you can be empathetic, you can be caring, you can be helpful, you can do all of these things, but it's done through a different mode of being than what the nice guy does. Because with them, there's bullshit underneath it. They're bringing some kind of need or something into it. They're expecting things back. They are not standing up for themselves. They think being complicit or going along and not making waves or anything is like, is being a good person. It's actually not, and the book will actually delve into that and show you why you lying and compromising yourself like that is bad in the long run. Bad for you and bad for others too. And so by altering how we think about these things and breaking some of those beliefs and starting to operate in a different manner, you shift from nice guy to kind or legitimately good man. Because I wouldn't classify nice guys as good after you read this book. And looking back on my own life as someone who has been in that paradigm before, I can see how I was erroneous in my way of being and how it tripped me up and caused me problems because I wasn't being honest, because I was being a bitch in in certain senses. And I I think based on my interactions with most with not most with many people in the video game community who, especially like my generation or younger, are coming from more and more, divorced homes. They Masculinity is under attack in society right now, which is bullshit. I'm not saying that the negative aspects of masculinity should just be accepted. I'm not saying that, but just as a whole, masculinity is not bad and femininity is not good. They both have aspects of them that are positive and can be expressed in positive, healthy ways. And there's also ways that they can come out negatively and in toxic ways, both sides. And we're losing that distinction. We really need to gain that distinction. So, but, again, a lot of people are, a lot of guys are afraid to be masculine. They're afraid to stand up and not just be this nice guy who's walked all over. And they think they're doing the right thing. And I get it, because I've been there. But I think a lot of people, just from what I observe, from what I see, from the people I talk to in games and whatnot, would really benefit from reading this book. I think most dudes could probably take something away from this, even if you don't consider yourself truly like the classic like nice guy, like where you're not fully in it. There's just a lot of good information about adjusting your mindset and how you move through life to be more honest, more direct, yet still kind and not necessarily offensive. To stop neglecting your own needs. I talked just before about the need to take care of yourself first, but then how that can have a thing where it spills out to your inner circle and outer circle, but then it gets returned to you, and you get bigger and better, and you help more people around you, and that your ability to help gets bigger and better. This book will help you begin to take care of your needs in healthy ways, rather than the unhealthy ways, the covert contracts, all this other kind of bullshit that keeps you frustrated inside and wondering like, but I'm a nice guy, like why isn't this working out for me? And it's because at the end of the day, you're not truly being honest and you're not truly being good. And you need to adjust and recognize that the truth is good and taking care of your needs first is good, but it will enable you to do way more good for other people in a healthy, proper way. Actually, I need a little more of this. Throat's getting a little sore. Okay. 2 books down, 4 to go. At least for today, I think. Who knows? If we can get through all 4, that'd be good. And I can always pull up more from my list, since I do have a ton. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Dr. Marilee Adams. Now, interestingly enough, Marilee nearly became a client of mine for their website. I've had the chance to sit down and talk to her for a few hours. She's a lovely person. It was not the right time or situation for us to work together, but I've got nothing bad to say. And the foreword was written by Marshall Goldsmith, who, if you don't know who Marshall Goldsmith is, He is considered one of the top coaches in the world. He is right at the top working with like mega CEOs and all that kind of stuff. So this, he is no slouch. And despite the fact that this book has only 603 ratings, Marilee is someone who is brought in to speak at corporations, governments, all sorts of stuff because of this book. It is a little bit older. When it says publication date was 2016, but I think the original was I think it's older than that. I mean, this is the 3rd edition. I don't know exactly how far back it goes or when it was first published, but I think it might be one of those things where it first came out so long ago that it was like before Amazon ratings. You get what I mean? And it hasn't really had a resurgence since Amazon came out and ratings were a big deal, but that's okay. It's still a really solid book that is trying to illustrate 2 different mindsets and why you would choose one mindset over the other. The 2 mindsets are learner mindset or judger mindset. And in fact, the book has this thing called the choice map, because you're always making choices. And this is really what the book is based on everything you see in this map. It explains it out further, but I don't think I'm really giving anything away because you can find this everywhere online. Despite this map, you could just go look it up and see kind of what it's talking about. The book still dives into the details that can really help you understand why you would want to do this. It would counter some arguments, because, as we read a book, we shouldn't necessarily just take what it's saying, as the gospel, right? And you might go, oh, I don't know about this, or what about that, or whatever else. So when we read books, they give us the full picture, right, and expand on the ideas being presented. So right here, you can see anything that impacts us at any moment, your thoughts, feelings, or circumstances, or whatever. Something happens and it affects us, and we can choose essentially 2 paths, right? We can choose to observe and learn, or we can choose to go down a bad path and start judging them. So if you are a more negative person and it's like, oh, this fucking happened, well, now I'm pissed off, god damn it, why the fuck does this always happen, right? You've gone down the judger mindset. Here it's whose fault is it? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with them? It's automatic reactions, it's blame, it's about who wins and who loses, and it will lead you, if you just react, to, and I mentioned this last night, I was talking about some people I knew, and someone even watching in the chat, when something happens, let's say you knock over a glass or something like that, and you spill some water on the table or something. It's like, oh, I'm so dumb, I'm so stupid, or whatever. You've just basically reacted and jumped all the way down here into this judger pit, where it's like, why am I such a failure? Why are they so stupid? Why bother? This isn't a helpful mindset. It's only reinforcing that you suck, or the world sucks, or whatever else. It's incredibly pessimistic. It just drags you down. It's not useful. It's not helpful. Some people might say, well, I'm not pessimistic, I'm just realistic, or something like that. It's like, okay, well, how's that working out for you? I mean, really, because you can choose at the end of the day. I'm showing you a map right here on the screen that shows you don't have to just react like that or just be a realist and be like, oh, well, this is just what it is. Well, if you're not actually happy and you're miserable and you're saying these things to yourself and you're keeping yourself down and you're depressed or whatever, stop doing that. You don't have to. And I wouldn't call myself someone who is just optimistic and blind to the reality that life is suffering. I started the fucking video today off stating that. You know, what I'm doing here is because I recognize people are struggling. So it's not like I'm just like, no, 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 everything's good. But I don't react and go down this negative pathway. Actually, that's not true. That's not true. Once in a while, I will, because I'm still human. And I can forgive myself for that. And I try to catch myself, because you can see right here, you start going down this path, but you can switch. You can go, wait a minute, no, and catch yourself. Go, this isn't productive, this isn't useful. And what will happen, I'll use an example. Something happened even just, was it yesterday? Monday, yesterday. It was yesterday, actually, Tuesday. PayPal was like really fucking my shit up in the morning. Like they were holding back a significant amount of money from me. It was something where I had some purchases I wanted to make and all that kind of stuff between Black Friday and the Christmas coming up and all that kind of stuff. And I was frustrated because it had been a while that I was waiting on this, and then I heard it might be another week, and I'm just like, what the fuck, right? But even then, I tried to catch myself after, and sometimes you just gotta vent a little bit. Everyone can take a few minutes to vent. I'm not saying that, but try to catch yourself if you do. If you do, like, I don't usually go down like that. Usually I'm like, okay, this isn't ideal, but like I'm gonna figure it out. Like, what am I supposed to learn here? What assumptions am I making? You know, what happened? What are the facts? All these kinds of questions in the learner mindset are things I'm actively like, nope, I'm not gonna let myself go down this angry road. That's not gonna serve me. I'm just robbing myself of happiness. What am I supposed to learn here? That's actually one of the most powerful questions I ask myself basically every fucking day as shit comes up, right? And I don't necessarily do it. I'm not necessarily cognizant or actively thinking about it. Sometimes it's just a mode of being. Like, it's not that the question necessarily comes forth. Sometimes just because I've trained myself to do this at this point, I just start naturally trying to figure out, what am I supposed to figure out here? You know, what am I supposed to gather from this? What am I supposed to learn? Without actually asking that question first. But if you notice yourself going downhill, try to catch yourself and go, wait, hold on. Let's examine this. Like, vent a little bit if you need to, and then go, hold on. And this is exactly what happened yesterday as I'm describing this, by the way. I was like, there's something I'm supposed to learn here. There's something I'm supposed to figure out here. There's something I'm supposed to know. Maybe it was just that I went through that experience just to have an example to bring up that was fresh while showing off this choice map on my screen on this stream. It's possible, because it turned out to not be a big deal. It was just a minor hassle where I had to go into my account, do something real fast, get in touch with the other person, and they had to go into their account and just hit a button real fast, and then I had my money. I was catastrophizing something before everything was fully revealed, because they had told me some information that it's like, well, it could be up to 7 days. And I'm like, this is bullshit. But it turned out that that person just needed to go in and like confirm that they meant to pay, and then boom, they were like, okay. They said it was all good. Here's your money. You're good to go. This can really be applied to any situation that comes up, whether it's like company screwing you a little bit. What am I supposed to learn here from this? Instead of just placing blame like this company sucks and all that, which there's a time for, but chances are, you know, it's possible, it's at least possible that you had some hand in not doing something that you were maybe responsible for, and because you dropped the ball, something came along and surprised you. Again, this ties back into extreme ownership. What am I responsible for? What can I learn here? Is any bit of this on my shoulders? Or that I caused any of this? Even 1% of it. And even if not, can I take ownership and responsibility to fix it? Is sitting around going, why do I suck so bad? Why did they suck so bad? Is any of that productive or fixing anything? It's just, again, it's robbing you of your own happiness. I mean, I don't think that's super useful. I'm not perfect. I don't expect anyone watching this to be perfect. I don't expect anyone here to be Dalai Lama-like, where it's like shit comes up and you just never lose your temper. Just be like, no, it's okay. I'm at peace. I'm just gonna breathe. Like, no, of course not. We have things that come up. But if you read this book and you really try to take away what it's saying and try to begin to think differently, shift your mindset, but also if you still go down that path, hopefully this book, just remembering it, can be an interrupt. That you're like, wait, no, I'm going down like, I know this goes nowhere good. What can I do to shift course and use this switching lane to get up onto the learner mindset instead? To where I'm making thoughtful choices, win-wins situations, getting a solution so I can move on with my life that is satisfactory. Because at the end of the day, life is a series of problems. And your brain is a problem-solving machine. And this is life, basically. If we didn't have any problems, we would go insane. We'd have nothing to do. I mean, briefly, you could distract yourself with, drugs, sex, escape, video games, whatever. People do that a lot, but and to the point sometimes where they're so addicted that their life falls apart because they don't want to deal with their problems. But if you had no problems, you would possibly go even more insane. Because you would just have nothing to do. Sure, again, maybe a few days would be nice. It'd be kind of like vacation, briefly. But then after that, it'd be like you would start to go insane. And you might start creating problems just to have problems to fix. In fact, you likely would. So, change your questions, change your life. It is a very practical book. It's a really... I read this book because I knew I was going to be talking to Marilee about, the company's website. Her company is called the Inquiry Institute. You can find it, Inquiry Institute, on Google. I think it's .com. It's been a while since it's been like 2 years or so since I had my meetings with her. But I actually was really glad that I wound up reading it because I was like, yeah, no, this is something I can implement and take with me. And I don't know if it might have been the case that it could have come at a better part of my life in the past had I read it, but it wasn't necessarily a bad time for it to come along when I did read it. So it's a book I think that, unlike some of the other books I'm talking about on here, are like, if you're dealing with this, then you want to read this book. This is a book that it's like, it's just good information that you can probably read whenever, and it would help you out. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about this one. I don't think so. Again, this choice map, you can just go on Google image search. You can do, change your questions, change your life choice map, and this will come up. And just this alone, if you really kind of think about it and study it a little bit, can start to help. But I would recommend the book. I would. It will go into more detail. It will give you some actual good questions. I mean, some of them are laid out on here. But it, like it says, 12 powerful tools for leadership, coaching, and life. Just as I'm reading the little thing here, where it says, Adams uses a highly instructive and entertaining story that illustrates how to quickly recognize any undermining questions that pop into your mind. That's the cool thing about this book. It's not super dry in the sense that it's just laying out information. There is actually a narrative and story where you're following along, and it kind of takes you through everything that she wants to talk about and teach you. So it's not just a matter of like, okay, in the next chapter, here's some really dry textbook-like information. It's not really like that. There's like one or two books on here that are kind of like that I still think the information is so useful that you got to do it, that you got to read it. But this is not one of them. It's actually not a bad read, to be honest. All right. Let's go to number 4. This one, 47,000 ratings. Wow. If there's one book on here that you gotta get the audiobook of, it's Greenlights, because it's read by Matthew Mcconaughey himself. This book, I skimmed through some of the reviews. Look at these top 2. First, insulting, laughable, awful, beyond disappointing, easily put down and dismissed. But then you have Gather Around the Campfire, even better than my high expectations for it, worth every dollar, unfiltered, raw, authentic, excellent read. This is a super polarizing book, apparently, and I'm not sure where the lines are drawn on it, to be quite frank, because I've talked to people who really liked it that I don't know if I was surprised they liked it or not, but I was surprised they even read it, to be honest. It's a book that basically Matthew McConaughey has been journaling for most of his life. And he decided to sit down and go back through his journals and see all these things that happened to him over his life, the lessons he learned, and kind of take some of the better bits and pieces out of them and tell a story about something he went through and some of the lessons he learned and how it's led him to where he is. The fact of the matter is, this dude has led a remarkable life. And part of that might just be because he's a famous Hollywood actor. But just because you're in Hollywood doesn't mean you are not struggling. Even in Hollywood, one of the stories from the book was, for a while there, he was just the rom-com guy, and he was just, that's all he did. And he didn't want to do rom-coms anymore. And he made the decision, I'm not going to do this anymore. Studios kept coming back and going, okay, well, how about $5 million to do a rom-com? It's like, no. How about 6? How about 7? How about 10? About 12? And like now they're like, we're really going to pay you to like do this. And he decided to still not do it. And so he was kind of out of Hollywood for a few years because the studios were like, we only want you for rom-coms. You're the rom-com guy. You don't want to do rom-coms anymore? Well, then you're not getting any jobs. And there was a dark period there for him. But then, because he was out of Hollywood, he broke his typecasting as the rom-com guy. And then other people came around and wanted him to do projects that were not rom-coms. And he has since developed into an actor who has done some really interesting roles in, what was it, the true crime TV series. He's done movies like Interstellar, uh, Dallas Buyers Club, which is a great movie, and what he put himself through physically to do that movie was really quite impressive. Um, no wonder he won awards for it, or at least nominated. I think, what is he? Academy Award winning actor, right? You don't win Academy Awards for rom-coms, right? But he still had to go through a dark period where it's like, am I ever going to work again? Am I doing the right thing? I have a family to take care of. I just turned down $15 million. How many of you watching this would turn down $15 million because you don't want to act in a certain type of movie? You know, it sounds kind of silly, but because he chose to stay resolved to what he was feeling inside, it opened up totally new personalities where his career went in, it blew up so much more, right? That's just one story and example. He also talks about going to Africa. He talks about stories of growing up and, you know, physically getting into it with his dad. Or maybe it was his brother. His brother definitely physically got into it with his dad. I think he did too, though. And some people, from some of the reviews I saw, it's like, oh, he's glorifying, you know, physical abuse, and he's teaching bad lessons. It's like, if you're a snowflake who gets offended at that shit, don't read this book, or don't listen to it on audio book. He's not glorifying it. He's saying this was a reality and this is what it is and this was my experience and this is what I took away from it. And he's not sitting there being a bitch over it, like, my daddy hit me. And again, I'm certainly not making fun of anyone's trauma, especially as someone who, like, understands how impactful that shit can be. But he's not stuck there anymore. Again, I want to just go back, like, I'm not saying being a victim is bad, but you need to get past that as soon as possible. You don't want to stay there crying about that. You accept it happened to you and then go, how the fuck am I going to get past this? How do I get past and become a survivor and then to thriver? He is talking from the position of someone who isn't breaking down over that. He examined it, he accepted it, he took lessons from it, he understands it. He's at a higher, more evolved, more mature way of thinking about that kind of stuff, even though he went through it. And that's where, if you are in that place, again, I didn't mean to make fun there, but you need to get out of that as soon as possible. There's nothing to be gained there. There's nothing good about that spot for you or for anyone else. And I only say it that way because I was there too. And I realized I had to get out of there. And that's what this is all about. So no, he's not going to sit there and, you know, come from a victim position. But just because he's not doing that doesn't mean he's glorifying it. He's just saying this is what it is. And we all have, most of us have stuff like that. And we could look at that and go, okay, he isn't being held down by that. He isn't held back by that. He has always examined and tried to look at, okay, what is going on here? What are the lessons I'm learning? All that kind of stuff. Again, going back to the book I just reviewed, by the way, The Choice Map. The judger mindset's almost like a victim mindset if you're being really frank about it. You know, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with them? Why is my dad this way? Why does he think, you know, physically challenging me is a rite of passage? Right? The learner mindset would be, what am I supposed to be learning from this? Like, this is what was This is the situation and the circumstance I find myself in. What can I take from this? It actually also goes back into what you might learn from extreme ownership with it too. What is it about this that I have a part in? What am I supposed to learn here? So on and so forth. Like, all these things actually tied together. This is a mindset. It's a growth mindset. It's a learner mindset. It's about not being stuck. It's about being not necessarily putting rose-colored glasses on and pretending it's not bad or it didn't happen or anything like that. I mean, I talk to people and I work with people who've gone through some massive trauma, and I'm not making light that it's not significant and impactful. But you can get to a point where you're no longer affected by it. In fact, that's the point of the work I do with people. And all of these people have the right mindset that is required as you begin to go through that and as you come out of it to have a good life, a life that is something that justifies all the pain. So this one, again, I don't know if it is for everyone. I don't know. I with where I'm at now, when I listened to it, what I heard was someone who similarly went through different struggles, different than my own. Probably not as I don't think anyone would look at Matthew McConaughey and think he had like a really awful life. But it's not about, measuring struggles. Just because he wasn't like bullied in school doesn't mean he just had it easy the whole way through. And another thing to appreciate is he's just brutally honest. Like, not everything he's done is good or godly, so to speak. I think now, at this point in his life, at 50 years old, he is really looking back and seeing all the lessons he's learned and gotten a lot better as a person, is what I kind of took away from the book, as far as where he's at now. But he can review these things in his life where he did the wrong things, like stealing or lying or whatever else. And weirdly, his family kind of had like a very odd morality around stealing and lying and stuff, where sometimes it was okay and sometimes it wasn't. I don't necessarily agree with the morality, but it's interesting how it informed him and how he grew up and where he came from. And I think he's just a very interesting character. If you kind of hear some of the stuff, he's done a lot of podcasts with people. When he started doing media for this book, it came out, what was it, last year? I think 2020. So we were in the middle of the pandemic. So instead of going on, Good Morning America or something, which he might have done too, he was actually doing a lot of podcasts over Zoom or whatever else that was put on YouTube, where he's just talking with someone, a major podcaster or whatever, talking about the book, doing media that way. And instead of just like the few minutes he might get on a morning show, he really got to dive in for an hour or two about his life experiences, his philosophies, what he's been through, his beliefs, all that kind of stuff. And he's actually someone who has a surprising amount of depth. He is not the dumb rom-com actor that you might think if you knew him from those movies. He's actually extremely thoughtful about life, and I think if you want to get some insight into that, he won, I think it was an Academy Award, and in his speech where he's thanking everyone, he kind of gets into that a little bit about just briefly a bit of his life philosophy and stuff, and just that alone will give you some insight into how much this guy thinks about life and kind of how he lives his life and all that. And if that is interesting to you at all, and his body of work is interesting to you at all, then this book will likely be interesting to you. But to be fair, this book it does jump around a lot. There's not really a coherent narrative. Like, one chapter will just be about this time in his life and some of the stuff you learned, and then we're going to jump over here 20 years ahead, and we kind of jump around and do all these different things. It's a collection. It should be understood as a collection of stories about experiences he's been through and things he's learned from it. And the title, Green Lights, is basically... He kind of says right here, I found a reliable theme as he was looking back over his life when things were working out versus when they weren't. An approach to living that gave me more satisfaction at the time, and still, if you know how and when to deal with life's challenges, how to get relative with the inevitable, you can enjoy a state of success I call catching green lights. So basically, when the traffic light turns from red to green and you go, you have success, that's what it is. And so he's basically saying, like, as I look back over, he kept diaries for the past 35 years. So as I look back over 35 years of my life, what are the themes that emerged when I was doing good versus when I was doing bad? When things were working out for me versus when they weren't? And what are my takeaways so that I can have more success going forward, because I should act and do more of the stuff that brings me success versus not, right? So it's a really interesting memoir, I guess. This is interesting notes about successes and failures, joys and sorrows, things that made me marvel and things that made me laugh out loud, how to be fair, how to have less stress, how to hurt people less, how to get hurt less, how to be a good man, how to have meaning in life, and how to be more me. I think all those things are things that all of us could always have some reminders or lessons on, or get a little better at as we go through this life. So, let's see here. Don't know if I'm going to do the full 2 hours today, because my throat is starting to hurt, and I got 2 more books. I think we'll get close. It might only be like an hour 45 or something like that. Alright. This guy is the most badass motherfucker alive. 45,000 ratings on this book. And that looks like a solid 5 stars. I gotta just see here. 88% 5 star, 8% 4 star. That's 96% positive rating. Right? That was just 311. That doesn't totally add up, right? 3, 1, and 1 is 5, and 8 is 13, plus 88% would be 101%. Yeah, if there's any negative reviews, it's that he curses a lot. If you're watching this stream, you know I'm saying what the fuck quite a bit, so if my cursing offends you, then this book is not to read. It is who he is. He is a hardcore motherfucker, and he does not fuck around when it comes to life or going hard and just kicking ass and taking names. This dude was a Navy SEAL. If anyone watching this knows about Navy SEAL training and Hell Week, this guy did it basically on broken legs or broken feet. Like, he had to, like, all his feet were, like, the bones were all shattered, and so he just taped his feet up so badly. And then on top of that, like, he couldn't even run properly, and they were running for like miles at a time. So he'd be in like excruciating pain for the first few miles until his body finally went numb. So it's like he did like Hell Week on hard mode. And it's already hard mode for most people. I mean, it's just insane, the physical stress this guy has put his body through and survived. Not just Hell Week, he like, he is a fucking animal. And it is interesting because he came from a background, poverty, prejudice. No one would want this guy's childhood. His father beat him and his mother, like, badly, until they finally escaped. And they escaped to the town that the KKK was headquartered in. And he is obviously a black dude. An entire childhood of an awful trauma, leading him to being overweight, working a totally dead-end job, just nothing going for him whatsoever. And he turned it around. First off, he was super overweight. He had to lose like over 100 pounds in just a few months, and he did. He basically rode an exercise bike all day long, and the only food he was able to eat was like a banana, a piece of baked plain chicken, and some broccoli every day for like 3 months. And just burning thousands upon thousands upon thousands of calories every day to make it in to the military to do SEAL training. Because he saw, just one day when he came home from work, like, he saw a TV show showing what Navy SEALs go through for Hell Week. And it was kind of like, if I could do that, then I wouldn't hate myself so much. This guy is the only man in history to complete elite training as a Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, and Air Force Tactical Air Controller. He has set records in endurance events. This guy's self-discipline and mental toughness is through the roof. Everyone should follow this guy on Instagram because it's just amazing to see what he does, and his message is always good, and you can't argue with this dude. And not only that, he basically kind of single-handedly is breaking kind of what we know about the limits of humanity. An incredibly inspiring individual to overcome what he did in his childhood and to accomplish everything he has and how hard he is. I don't know if his method is right for everyone. I think I take a different approach, like, in the sense that I would rather heal trauma rather than just be such a hardcore badass that, like, I'm always fighting myself, you know? But you can't argue with the results. You can't argue with what this guy is able to accomplish and put himself through, and just how he lives his life. And there's still really great lessons to take from his book, from his Instagram. It's always something inspiring. It's always something that is real and unfiltered. And despite overcoming trauma and my belief of being kind to yourself, compassionate, I brought up the book Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It, which is about basically repeating a mantra of I love myself, all this kind of stuff. I don't think you'll find David Goggins doing that kind of stuff, but he does, interestingly, in his own philosophy, love himself, because he does all this for himself, for his self-esteem and self-worth, and it's born out of his incredible discipline and commitment to accomplishing the next level. How far can I go? You know, he has a line that I've heard him say in a few interviews now, where he's like, you know, when I die, I want to go to heaven, and I want God himself to sit there and go, you did some shit even I didn't know you could do. It's obviously a pretty big goal. It is, even if you heal trauma, even if you love yourself and all that kind of stuff, you are still going to need discipline. You're still going to need mental toughness. You are still going to need to do hard work if you want to achieve anything, accomplish anything. You're going to have to put yourself, you're going to have to grind a bit. You're going to have to go through some fears and doubts. You can learn some really good practical tips that he's developed, and techniques, mental techniques, and things like that. Um, one of them he calls the cookie jar, which is, things he knows about himself that he's accomplished that he can pull on and rely on when things seem tough. So because he's accomplished some things or survived some things even, right? So even if you haven't accomplished things, but you've just survived some things, you can look on that and go, okay, but I survived that. I did good there. I was actually talking with one client who has gone through some sexual abuse as a child, and there was times when, as a younger child, they were too young to do anything to stop it, basically. And in some cases they just went along, and they felt guilty almost for it, because well, I just went along with it, and you weren't old enough to consent one way or another, and you may have been saving yourself from more pain had you tried to resist it, right? So it might be a lesser of two evil things, and it's we would never say anyone who's 8 or 9 years old could ever consent to sexual abuse, regardless of whether or not they put up a fight or not, right? We wouldn't say that about any other kid, so we can't say that about you. But later on in life, a few years later, as they were a teenager, they did say no. And they didn't even recognize they did it. And I called this out to them. I was like, you said no, good job. And they're like, oh, that's right, I did. I put a stop to it. I didn't allow myself to be made a victim again by this person. They said no, they ran away. They were still a teenager living at home, but they not only said no, they, went to their parents about it. And while the situation wasn't resolved in a super awesome way that worked out maybe the best for everyone involved, they still said no. They still stood up for themselves in that moment. I had an experience like this as well, where in my childhood, I remember my father was just this, as a very large figure, as it is for the case for most, children, or especially boys, when you're 5 years old, And at 5 years old, I stood up to him over something when he was not doing something cool, and he was being physically abusive. And years later, I recognized the same thing. I had the same kind of realization where, I was thinking of myself as very weak throughout a lot of my childhood. But then I was like, wait a minute. When it really counted, I stood up and said no. And so even that is something you could throw in your own cookie jar, even if you're in a bad place in life, even if you're still struggling with trauma, even if you're just watching this and you're not where you want to be, and you're watching these streams because you're trying to figure out how to get out of your own personal hell, or whatever's holding you back, or you have breakdowns or depression or anxiety or whatever the fuck you're dealing with. Try to think back about those places where you did have some wins, where you stepped up and you did, get it. Even if you're not on this guy's level, where he then went on to achieve so many other things, you probably have a few wins in your life at some point where you did the right thing, where you stood up for yourself or whatever it is. And then what happens is, as he comes up against things that are really challenging him, where it's like, I don't know if I can do this, he reaches into the cookie jar and he's like, no, I'm the badass motherfucker who did this. I'm the badass motherfucker who stood up and said, no, I'm not going to take this abuse. I'm the person who didn't allow this to happen, or I made this happen, or I achieved this, or I won this, or whatever, right? And so it's things that you can dip into, that you can remind yourself of in tough moments, about the fact that you can do it. So just one practical tip. Again, not all of us have to now start running ultra marathons, but we can take away things about discipline, about mental toughness, some extremely practical techniques to carry us through and to accomplish things, to start even if you're not, even if you're in a bad spot, if you're depressed or something, you can still use some of these practical tips and tools to just begin to change your life now. I'm going through water like crazy right now, trying to keep my throat from getting any worse. Hope this heals up before tomorrow. Or at least there's only one more stream. And then I get some days off to rest it again. Alright, so far we've gone through extreme ownership. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. Green Lights, and Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. This last one, what I think will be the last one, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Dr. Susan Jeffers. Dynamic techniques for turning fear, indecision, and anger into power, action, and love. This is a book that I read until I think about the fifth chapter, and as I was just not getting a lot out of it by chapter 5 or so, and I kind of skipped through the rest and kind of skimmed it real fast, and I realized there wasn't a whole lot more for me to take away, so I didn't want to continue reading it. But the first 2 chapters alone are worth picking up this book. And again, audiobook, well, $5.95 with discounted Audible membership. I think the audiobook's probably only like $6 then, even if you don't have a Audible membership, you just want to buy the book outright. Or what is this, $9.50 for the Kindle? Either way, I put this book on here just for the first 2 chapters, generally speaking. It just lays out very well kind of what's happening when you're dealing with fear and what to do about it in the moments. It just gives you, there's just practical mindset shifts where so often people are tripped up or held up because fear gets in the way, and it's like, I can't do this, I'm afraid, I don't feel bad about this, whatever else. And it just makes you like recognize the reality of the fear, what it's all about, and like, nope, you can do this. You're just kind of change how you're looking at it. It's gonna suck, but you're gonna survive. And here's some other tips to like get through it. We do, as she says here in this little excerpt, in all my years, I've never heard a mother call out to her child as he or she goes off to school, take some risks today. It's more like, be careful. We kind of do default to playing it safe. We get a lot of messages from the world about, oh, do you really want to do that? And then people come up with excuses or reasons why you shouldn't do something. Even recently, someone in my life in the past few months, I was telling them about some of my own plans, and they were kind of like, oh, do you really want to do that? Shouldn't you just do this? Shouldn't you play it safe, basically? And I knew it was coming out of care for me. But, I kind of said, well, hold on. When should I go do this thing that I really want to do? Should I just play it safe the rest of my life and never live my life? Is that what you really want from me? I recognize that you have concerns, but I'm not going to allow, there's never a good time to do things. There's never a good time. Starting this stream and going down this path where I really went hard, again, I had been coaching and been working on making this transition, but I thought it was going to be a lot longer. I went over this last night. It was not a good time for me to be like, oh, I'm going to make the switch. But I knew internally I had to do it, and it was the time to do it. And generally speaking, in many of your own lives, if there's something that needs to be done, there's probably not a good time to do it. But we have to overcome those fears. We have to believe in ourselves that we can do it. We have to feel that fear, but do it anyway. And it does come down to having a bit of a lack of trust in ourselves. We have to believe in ourselves a little bit more. We have to remember that whatever happens to you, you can handle it. And when you look at the reviews for this book, this person, it was life-changing. There was someone here. The whole book is an intro, no real substance. I don't know if I agree with that one. I think I read a review where someone basically was like, if you... oh, yeah, right here. There isn't anything that's earth-shattering or even new. Most of it's probably even things you may have thought yourself. However, the simplicity of what she says is delivered in a way that does make it fresh, new, and life-changing. I think that's the real benefit of this book. There's not a lot in here that I was shocked to learn, or like, oh my god, this is so crazy. The information is just presented in such a good way that it really clarifies about feeling fear, how it holds us back, and changing your mindset so that you start to go through tough things and start working on your life, start accomplishing things, start changing things for yourself, start, not letting your fear hold you back from the things you want. The reason I chose gamers as a niche to help people, aside from I am one myself, but I see how many people are escaping to video games because they don't want to feel the pain and fear and everything else that comes along with actually making some tough decisions, actually going through with some plans that they actually have. So many people say, oh, I'll do this someday, but someday never comes because it's like there's a lot of fears about starting a business or going on an adventure that you really want to go on. And we stay timid, and it's like we play it safe because of that. If there's things in your life that you're not doing because you're afraid and you're just playing it safe, you don't want to put yourself out there, you don't want to be vulnerable, you don't want to be open, whatever, this is a good book to read at least the first few chapters. I didn't read the whole book. I'd say the first 3 or 4 chapters were worth the price alone, just for some of the insight. It wasn't even stuff I didn't necessarily know. It just brought it all together in a really good description, an understanding of it, that even if I kind of knew these things, it was like, oh, boom, here it is, all organized and clearly laid out, and there's just it helped me to solidify an understanding that I then took forward, and it adjusted how I operated from there. Actually, it really did. I can't remember when I even bought this book. I think it was about I was in Arizona, so it's been in the past 2 years. I think it was about 2 years ago, maybe 1.5 that I read this. And since then, it has been just like, I can't. It's one of those things where I can't even really point to any particular thing in the book. I just know that since then, my own operating system has changed on like a deep level, just with the tweaks because of the information that was like laid out. It's like, oh, right, this makes sense. This is what it is. This is how I'm going to move forward from there. Um, as far as should you read this at a certain time in your life versus any other time, I don't think like some of the other books I've laid out that you need to read it like if you're struggling with this kind of big question in your life, because this does actually really apply to kind of everyone all the time. So I'd say this is a book that is, again, probably worth the price just for the first few chapters. And anyone even remotely struggling, dealing with anxiety, dealing with fears, struggling to get out of being kind of stuck in a rut or a certain spot in life where they know they're holding themselves back a bit, this book is worth reading. If you've been into self-development for 10 years and you haven't come across this book, it's probably not worth reading. I'm guessing most people watching this haven't read a ton of books like this if you're kind of struggling. Generally from what I gather, I think a lot of people watching, they maybe have gone to therapists, they maybe have tried to figure a few things out, maybe they've tried to go in a certain direction, like religiously or philosophically, to try to get by, but maybe haven't really tackled it with a lot of self-study and self-work themselves yet. Maybe they've done a few things here or there, but they just didn't begin, or didn't even know where to begin, or things like that. So now I know some of you are kind of taking some of my suggestions when I talk about books to read and things like that, and you're already seeing results. So if you're one of those people who like oh, this information's out there and I'm starting to work through it, things are getting better and all that, this is a book to probably read if you're in that section of life. If you are more further ahead, you've done a lot of study, you've read a lot of books, maybe do the look inside and try to check out the first few pages of something and see if it's resonating or something you really need. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for but then again, if I read it 2 years ago, I would have been over a decade in, and I still found it useful. So maybe it is worth reading, even if you're 10 years in. It's $10 to start shifting your mindset. And if you find that if you find yourself being held back from doing things you want to do, or that you feel you need to do regularly in life, this is a book you should read. That's it. If you're not that, if you don't find it hard to stand up and put yourself through things that you need to, and you're kind of disciplined, or you're willing to get on stage when you need to, and that's not the kind of stuff you're struggling with, then this book will help you out. You're all okay. All right. I think I'm gonna end. That's the last book. So let's go over it real fast again. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. This is a really good book. Really good book. It will help you even if you're not a leader in a leadership position. It massively impacted how I do things in leadership positions. Not just in video games, but even as someone who has been self-employed for many years now and is now doing this, right? And I have to be a leader in the sense that I'm getting a stream going, getting a community going, and trying to help people and building business and all that. That requires leadership. But even if not, you are still the leader of your own life. And as the leader of your own life, even if you don't have subordinates or people under you, or you don't run an organization, you're not even, running whatever. If you have 0 leadership positions, you will still get a lot out of this, because it just is about taking ownership for yourself, taking responsibility, and it really lays out and explains how that will positively benefit and impact your life. No more Mr. Nice Guy. I think basically if I had to guess, 99% of the dudes who are watching this video ever, whether it's live or on YouTube or for many years to come, anyone who watches this stream whatsoever, if you're a guy, you should probably just buy this book. There's going to be very, very few of you who don't need this book. Just especially with the audience I'm talking to. If you're a 65-year-old man, you probably don't need to read this book. It's possible you do, but you're probably old enough and in a different time period, from a different time period. But even then, some of them will benefit from this book. But I think most people in my generation and younger, if you're a guy, this is a book that you really should pick up and read. This is a book that not nearly enough dudes are reading. And chances are you have some aspects of being a nice guy. Even if you're not like one like through and through, there might still be some things that you're doing that you can read this book and take away and go, oh shit, I gotta stop doing that if I want to be better. And not just if I want to be better, if I want my life to be better. Because everything in there shows how you're holding yourself back, you're hurting people around you, all by just not living your truth and being honest and embracing yourself as, again, what I said is a kind man. If you're trying to please others instead of taking care of your own needs, if that's you at all, you should read this book. Change your questions, change your life. This, again, is just about switching from more of a negative, shitty mindset to one that's more inquisitive. I won't even call it positive, just more inquisitive. What can I learn from this? It's not about rose-colored glasses and everything just being all sunshine and rainbows and shit. Like, that's not, we're not discounting reality. But instead of allowing shitty situations or things to get us down, it's about pausing, catching ourselves, and being like, all right, that's just going to put us in a bad place. It's not useful. It's not helpful. How do we turn this around and look at this in a different way to where I'm at least not miserable, and it might even be beneficial? Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Just really interesting. If you're looking for something that's not so informational, but still want to pick up some lessons and hear some fun stories along the way, again, this book appears to be quite polarizing based on some of the reviews. I didn't think it was that bad at all. Named one of the best books of the year by The Guardian. I mean, again, it's unflinching honesty, unconventional wisdom, and lessons learned the hard way about living with greater satisfaction. It's not a therapist, writing out, well, this is what you should do. And, it is a real life, real lessons learned from a real life lived by someone who's really interesting, has done some really interesting things, has gone very far in life. And just because he's done those things, it doesn't mean his childhood was horribly different than some bars of people watching this. He was still a kid who played and built a treehouse and shit, and there were lessons from that too. Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins. This guy, go follow this dude on Instagram and Facebook, whatever you use. I don't give a fuck what you use. Just go follow this guy. If you don't already follow this guy, go follow this guy. Go look at some of his most recent posts. If you need any help with discipline, mental toughness, practical tips to achieve those things, where you just want to read a story where you can't believe the kinds of shit that humans can accomplish and do when they put their mind to something, and what this guy was able to actually put himself and do, read this book. This guy is incredible. Incredible. And he can be heard on lots of podcasts and stuff. He's done tons of interviews and stuff. Go on YouTube, search David Goggins. You're going to find people who interview him and can get a real sense of how he lives his life. I'm not saying that his life is the way for everyone to live. It's super hardcore, but you can still take bits and pieces away, lessons that you can incorporate into your life, practical tips for better discipline, for more mental toughness, resilience, all that kind of stuff that are really useful. And feel the fear and do it anyway. Again, just the first few paragraphs were the big... It even though I knew some of these things, it tied everything together for me about coming across situations that were hard, were difficult, and still choosing to move forward through it with some good practical tips. It's not even the practical tips, it was just an understanding of what was going on when you come up and you start feeling fear. Just having that logical understanding shifted things for me, and I carried that forward with it. So, thank you to everyone who watches. Thank you for the follow earlier, Swim Chris too. I'm like 20 away from being an affiliate, so if you haven't followed yet and you're watching this, even if you don't intend to watch in the future, if you could follow, that'd be really useful if you got anything from this. I will be back tomorrow night. It's Thursday night, so that's going to be at 9:30 Eastern to 11:30 Eastern. I just made a noise that he knows means to look to me, or to come to me. That's why he looked up. Yeah, I'm gonna rest my throat a little bit now since it's sore. Maybe suck on one of those throat lozenge things. I hope everyone has an awesome rest of their day. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Follow, join the Discord, all that kind of stuff. I'll be back tomorrow with some more books. Take care.